The sun had already dipped behind the jagged peaks of New Hampshire's White Mountains when 21-year-old Maura Murray vanished. Not into thin air, not in a way anyone could explain, but in a way that still echoes in the cold, dark woods almost 2 decades later. Maura was a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Bright, athletic-driven. But that winter afternoon, she was behind the wheel of her black Saturn, heading north, toward a destination no one could confirm. She didn't tell her friends. She didn't tell her professors. Not even her boyfriend. Only a cryptic email to her professors that morning. "I'll be out for a week. There's been a death in my family." There hadn't been. At 7:27 p.m., on a desolate stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, her car left the road. It struck a snowbank nose first, facing the wrong way. A passing school bus driver stopped and asked if she needed help. She declined. Said she had already called AA. She hadn't. By the time police arrived just minutes later, the driver's seat was empty. Her black Saturn sat silent in the cold night air, its hazard lights off. Maura was gone. Now here's where the facts fade and the shadows take over. A neighbor across the road swore they saw movement in the woods. A tall figure standing still, just beyond the tree line, no flashlight, no phone glow, just watching. The snow that night was fresh, soft, yet no one remembers seeing footprints. And yet every single person who came upon that scene would later say the same thing. They felt it, the overwhelming sensation of being watched. That was the beginning, the last confirmed sighting of Maura Murray. And whatever happened next has been buried in the frozen silence of the White Mountains for more than 20 years. The call to police came at 7:27 p.m. By 7:46 p.m. the first officer arrived. 11 short minutes, and in that time Maura Murray had already slipped away. Her car was locked, the airbags deployed. Inside, a faint trace of alcohol, a box of wine, a soda bottle with something that smelled like liquor inside, but no sign of Maura. By the next morning, the search was underway. K9 units swept the roadside. The dogs followed her scent just a short distance east along Rue 112. Then, suddenly, nothing. As if she had simply lifted off the ground. Locals came forward. One man said he saw a dark figure walking quickly up the road that night, head down, as if trying not to be recognized. Another swore he heard something else. Not footsteps, not human, but a low, dragging sound that faded into the forest. The deeper the search went into the woods, the stranger it became. Several volunteers reported hearing muffled voices. One man described it as a woman crying, but when they followed the sound, they found nothing. Not a single footprint led into those trees. Not one. And yet, in the cold February stillness, there were moments when they swore they saw movement. Between the pines, darting from trunk to trunk, never close enough to see clearly, always just far enough to make you question if it was ever really there. For days, the search stretched on. Helicopters scanned the forest. Search parties pushed deeper. But there was something about that stretch of Route 112, the way the light disappeared faster there, the way sound seemed swallowed by the trees. Some locals had a name for it. They called it the Silent Mile. By the end of the week, there was no trace, no footprints, no clothing, no body, just the abandoned Saturn and the empty, watching woods. If Maura had left on her own, where had she gone? If someone had taken her, how had they vanished without a trace? And if it was neither, then what was stalking the edge of those woods that night? In disappearances like this, witnesses are everything. But in the case of Maura Murray, the witnesses only deepened the mystery. The first was the bus driver, Butch Atwood. He told police he'd pulled up beside Maura's car, seen her standing outside. She didn't look injured. She didn't look panicked. But she didn't look right either. He said her eyes seemed distant, as if she were listening to something far away. When he offered help, she declined, telling him she had already called AAA. But he knew there was no cell service here. There never had been. The second witness was a woman who lived just down the road. She swore she saw a figure, possibly Maura, standing perfectly still near the edge of the forest about 10 minutes after the crash. The figure was facing the trees, not the road, and in that stillness she thought she saw something else. A pale hand resting on the figure's shoulder. before it vanished into the darkness. The third witness didn't come forward until weeks later. A man hiking near French Pond, about 2 miles from the crash site, claimed he saw a young woman wandering the tree line. She looked cold, lost, barefoot. He called out to her, but she turned away, and when she stepped behind a cluster of pines, she never stepped back out. By now, the case had drawn national attention. TV crews lined Route 112. Search teams returned to the scene again and again, but there was a growing problem. Each time someone went back into those woods, they came out saying the same thing. They heard footsteps behind them, but when they turned around, nothing. Some started whispering that it wasn't just a missing person case anymore. Something about that road, that forest had a pull, a hunger. And Maura's family, they weren't just fighting to find her anymore. They were fighting against something that didn't want her found. By the 4th day of searching, people began talking about the forest differently, not as a place to explore, but as something alive. Volunteers described feeling drawn off the main trails, as if something in the corner of their vision was guiding them deeper. More than once, searchers broke away from their groups, convinced they'd seen movement ahead, only to return hours later, shaken and pale. They'd all say the same thing: "I swear I heard someone calling my name." One search dog handler told investigators his trained KD9 refused to enter a certain section of the woods. The dog's body went rigid, its ears flat, a deep, guttural growl rumbling in its chest, and then it backed away, tail tucked, shaking. It was here, in this same stretch of forest, that a searcher reported seeing 2 shapes between the trees, one small, one much larger. He said the smaller shape looked like a young woman in dark clothing. The larger, he couldn't describe it, only that its outline seemed wrong, like the shadows themselves were bending around it. By now, the investigation was hitting dead ends. No confirmed sightings, no digital trail. Maura's phone was never used again. But something was clear. The more people entered those woods, the more the woods seemed to take from them. A veteran searcher, 18 years of experience, abruptly quit after combing the area near the crash site. When asked why, he just shook his head. "Those trees aren't empty," he said. "Something is in there, and it doesn't like being hunted." On the 7th day, Maura's father stood at the edge of the silent mile, staring into the forest. A TV crew caught it on film. You can still see it, that moment. He stops, tilts his head, and for just a second he smiles. Later, when asked what he'd seen, he wouldn't answer. 1 week after Maura disappeared, her boyfriend got a phone call. It came late at night, from a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, there was no voice, only a faint, rhythmic breathing. He said, "Hello, Maura, is that you?" And for just a moment there was silence, then a single quiet sob, followed by a voice barely above a whisper. "Help me." The call lasted exactly 7 seconds before it cut out. Police traced the number. It led nowhere, no subscriber, no billing records, not even a tower location. It was as if the call had come from nowhere at all. The family kept it quiet. They didn't want prank calls. But word leaked out, and soon psychics, self-proclaimed mediums, and internet sleuths swarmed the case. One psychic claimed Maura was still in the woods, but not alive. She said she could see her standing in the snow looking straight at her, and behind her, something tall, with no face. Even more chilling, 2 separate hikers reported finding strange marks on tree trunks about 2 miles from the crash site. Deep scratches. 3 parallel lines, carved high into the wood, higher than a human hand could reach without climbing. Some marks were fresh. Others looked decades old. The lead detective in the case was asked if the scratches could be from animals. He said yes, but his eyes told a different story. That night, searchers pushed toward the area where the marks had been found. The temperature dropped quickly. Snow began to fall again. One volunteer said he felt a hand grip his shoulder from behind. He turned. No one was there. But when he looked down, there were footprints in the snow beside him, and they were facing into the forest. He followed them for 30 feet, and then they just stopped. No more prints, only unbroken snow and the heavy silence of the woods. 2 weeks after Maura Murray vanished, the official search was scaled back, But for her family, it never stopped. Her father, Fred, returned to the silent mile alone. It was late afternoon, the sun slipping behind the trees, shadows stretching long across the snow. He followed the road to where her Saturn had been found. Then he stepped into the woods, just like Maura must have that night. Investigators later said his tracks went straight for nearly half a mile. Then something strange. The last dozen footprints were deeper, like he had started walking slower, or like something heavier was walking with him. When he came back out, his face was pale. He wouldn't speak to reporters, but to his family he said only one thing: "I saw her." That night the family home phone rang. "Caller ID'd unknown," Fred answered. No one spoke. Just a low, steady breathing and then a voice. "She's not lost. She's here." The line went dead. Months turned to years. Leads dried up, but strange reports kept surfacing from the White Mountains. Hikers spoke of seeing a young woman in a dark jacket, walking silently along the tree line, disappearing when approached. Some claimed they saw her standing in the middle of Route 112 on foggy nights, only to blink and find the road empty. And then came the most disturbing report. A hunter deep in the forest found a clearing, where the snow never seemed to stay. In the center was a perfect circle of bare ground, surrounded by trees scarred with those same 3 parallel marks. In the middle of the circle was a single object, a black knit mitten. Forensic testing showed faint traces of Maura Murray's DNA. To this day, no one knows what happened to Maura Murray. Only that on a cold February night in 2004, she stepped out of her car and into a place where the rules of the world no longer seem to apply. And some say if you drive Road 112 after dark, you can still see her in your rearview mirror.